Here we go. We're at part 3 on page 333. And in this case, we're moving on from the muscles of mastication, and we're going to consider the tongue. The tongue is a very interesting muscle in that it moves in a vast variety of ways. If you look at tongue as a microscopic slide mount, what you'll notice is that you're having some, how shall I say, fibers running together, and then suddenly they stop, and you have a bunch of other fibers running at either a diagonal or a right angle to those that have just stopped. And what that's telling us is that there's a variety of ways in which the fascicles align in the tongue. So there's all of these different options that you can do with your tongue. Very interesting muscle. It's a very interesting muscle, and it's innervated by the hypoglossal nerve. We learned that when we were studying openings of the skull. Okay, so there's the hypoglossal canal, and it innervates the tongue. It also innervates any muscle that ends in the word glossus, right? So muscles of that nature are going to also move the tongue. They are not intrinsic to the tongue, but they do move the tongue. And so they give us some examples here, like styloglossus, coming from the styloid process to the tongue. And then we have in the front here genioglossus, coming from the chin and going to the tongue. So anything that, how shall I say, inserts on the tongue or is a muscle of the tongue, it's going to be innervated by the hypoglossal nerve, which, is it listed here? Yes, it is. It's listed right here. So we have all of these different examples here of genioglossus, hyoglossus, styloglossus. This is coming from the hyoid bone. Okay, and they're all inserting onto the tongue, which by definition is operated by the hypoglossal nerve, cranial nerve number 12. Okay, and that's all you really need to know about that. Okay, then we have muscles that are intrinsic to the neck. Let's take a look at those. Okay, we're going to be starting here at this group. They're called, do you see that? The suprahyoid muscles. So we have a division at the hyoid bone. Okay, and then down here we have the infrahyoid muscles. So there's muscles above the hyoid, and they're listed right here: the digastric, the stylohyoid, the myohyoid, and the geniohyoid. These are all above the hyoid bone. These are all below, and we take these as a group right here, those four, just the way you like it. Okay, here is the hyoid bone right here. You can feel it if you feel back behind your chin and through and underneath the floor of your mouth and go all the way back, and then also consider where is your trachea and go above the trachea. You'll find a bone right there, and you'll be able to feel the edges of it on either side. Okay, and if you were to swallow, you would discover that this bone moves up and down. Okay, so these muscles are employed whenever we swallow something, even our own saliva. So you can take a quick swallow, put your fingers on the bone here, and see what the action feels like to yourself. Okay, so if we get a really close look here now, here we have a muscle that's the floor of the mouth, and that muscle is referenced is here it is, right here, Omohyoid. And it's just running along the floor of the mouth, and you can see the fascicle, direction of the fascicles, just the way you like it there. Here's an interesting little muscle right here. It's got its own little pulley. It attaches here. Here's a muscle belly. Here's a middle tendon that goes through the pulley, and then here's another muscle belly. Since it has two bellies, we call it digastric. Okay, so digastric. It's got an anterior and a posterior belly. Okay, and when we contract that, we're basically pulling down here on the jaw, and we're actually the jaw is quite stable in this position. We're actually elevating the hyoid. Okay, so that's the main action of this muscle, is to elevate the hyoid. Let's look back here again. Here they're actually beginning with digastric, and they're listing the origin as the mandible, and they're listing the insertion as the hyoid bone, and of course we're elevating the hyoid. And again, all of this is we're not actually going to be testing you on this particular thing. So there's a variety of nerves here that are considered, but the main thing I want you to know is this little advice right here, is that there's muscles that help form the floor of the oral cavity, but the main thing here is that they're elevating the hyoid and move the larynx. So sometimes when we're speaking, we elevate it and move the larynx superiorly, but it's mainly during swallowing. Okay, so that's the main thing here. That's what these suprahyoid muscles are for. The digastric, the stylohyoid, the myohyoid, that's the floor muscle, the geniohyoid. Okay, so we can see all the muscles that end, as you can see, on the hyoid bone, just the way you like it. Okay, then we move on, and we move on to the infrahyoid, and here again we have groups of muscles. They're mostly strap-like muscles, and their job is to depress the hyoid bone and the larynx during swallowing. And when you're speaking, these muscles are even more in use. The general nerve that's innervating this is the ansa cervicalis. It's a little loop of muscle that hangs down right here and right here, deep. Okay, and it's from the cervical plexus. The cervical plexus is the nerves of C1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and in this case, ansa cervicalis sort of is a loop of nerve that has little branches that come off and takes care of these strap-like muscles. Let's take a close look here and notice that we have one very long one that goes from the sternum all the way to the hyoid, and it's named sternohyoid. Okay, so sternum to the hyoid, called sternohyoid. Then we have from the sternum to the thyroid cartilage. This is the thyroid cartilage, and we're going to be calling that one the sternothyroid. Sternothyroid, going from the sternum to the thyroid. Then we have going from the thyroid to the hyoid, and that's the thyrohyoid. Do you see a system here? Going from the thyroid to the hyoid, we're going to call it thyrohyoid. And then we have an odd one here that's over here. It's sort of going through a little loop that you can't see, and it ends up over at the scapula on the back. And it's called the omohyoid. Okay, so omohyoid. And let's take a look here. The omohyoid, where is it listed? Mylohyoid, it's coming down here, is the omohyoid, right? And so it's going from the scapula to the hyoid bone, and it's depressing and retracting the hyoid bone. All of these below the hyoid are to depress the hyoid, and also some of them are attached to the larynx right here, and they're to depress the larynx at the time of swallowing, and in some cases speaking and pronouncing certain, how shall I say, sounds like G's and K. And so you can imagine, try different sounds and hold on to your little area here. If you're a male, it's called an Adam's apple. If you're the female persuasion, you can still feel it, but it's not so prominent. But you can put your finger there, and you can make all kinds of guttural sounds and things like that and see what moves it the most. Okay, so that's our situation right there. And up here we have the superior, the middle, and the inferior pharyngeal muscles, and they're listed right over here, and we'll pick them up in the next episode.